The first story begins with a young couple, Emily and Jason, who decided to hike through the Appalachian Trail. It was supposed to be their romantic escape from the noise of the city. Everything was peaceful at first. The sound of birds, the crunch of leaves, the gentle wind brushing through the trees. But by the second day, the forest felt different. The air was heavier, the woods quieter. It was as if every sound had been swallowed by the trees. That night, as they set up camp, Emily woke up to what she thought was the sound of footsteps circling their tent. Jason told her it was probably an animal, but the slow, deliberate steps didn't sound like any animal she knew. The next morning, they found large footprints in the dirt. They didn't belong to either of them, and they weren't animal tracks. When they followed the trail out, they found a small clearing with old camping gear and a half-buried shoe. The strange silence continued until they reached civilization, and to this day, neither of them can explain what had followed them through those woods. In the second story, a group of friends went hiking through the Rockies. They were experienced hikers, confident and prepared. But confidence doesn't matter when something out there doesn't want you in its territory. On the third night, after a long day of climbing, they camped near a stream. Around midnight, one of them woke up to the sound of someone whispering his name. When he opened his tent, he saw nothing but darkness. He thought it was one of his friends playing a prank, but when he looked around, everyone was fast asleep. He laid back down, but then heard it again, closer this time, a voice that sounded just like his own, repeating his name softly. Terrified, he stayed awake until dawn. When he told the group, they laughed it off, until another friend heard the same voice the next night. They packed up and left the next morning. Later, when they checked their map, they realized the area they camped in was known for missing hikers and unexplained disappearances. The locals called it the Echo Woods, because sometimes the forest whispers your name before it takes you. The third story comes from a solo hiker named Mark. He loved hiking alone, chasing peace and isolation. One summer, he went deep into the Pacific Northwest, miles away from the nearest road. Everything was fine for the first few days. Then he began noticing strange things: sticks arranged in patterns outside his tent, stones stacked into small towers along his path. He brushed it off as other hikers being creative, but when he found his name carved into a tree that he had never seen before, fear began to sink in. On the fourth night, he woke up to the sound of soft breathing right outside his tent. He froze, too afraid to move. Minutes passed, then silence. In the morning, he found boot prints circling his camp. Barefoot prints, small and narrow, as if belonging to a child. He packed his gear and left without stopping to rest. Mark said he never saw anyone out there, but the feeling of being watched never left him, even long after he returned home. Another terrifying account came from two sisters who hiked the desert trails in Arizona. They had planned everything: extra water, maps, GPS. The sun was burning hot during the day, but at night the desert turned freezing and eerily quiet. One night, while camping near a rocky canyon, they heard something that sounded like laughter echoing across the rocks. They assumed it was wind at first, but then the laughter turned into words, faint but unmistakable. Someone was calling for help. They tried to follow the voice, but as they walked, the sound kept moving farther away. When they turned back, their campsite was gone. Their tracks had somehow vanished in the sand. It took them hours to find their way back, and when they did, they saw something that froze them in place. Their tent was torn open, and their food was scattered everywhere. They ran back to their car before sunrise and never returned. Later, a local ranger told them about legends of spirits in the canyon who mimic human voices to lure travelers into getting lost forever. The fifth story takes place in the dense forests of Oregon. A man named Daniel went hiking with his dog, Max. They had been together on many trails before, but this one was different: old, overgrown, and barely marked on the map. After walking for hours, Daniel noticed that Max had stopped wagging his tail and was staring into the trees, growling. He couldn't see anything, but the dog refused to move. That night, Daniel woke up to Max barking violently at the darkness. When he shone his flashlight, he saw two glowing eyes reflecting back at him from behind a tree. Thinking it was an animal, he shouted, but the eyes didn't move. Then they blinked, sideways, like a reptile's eyes. The next morning, Max was gone. Daniel searched for hours, calling his name, but found only paw prints leading into a swamp and stopping abruptly. He never found his dog. Some say he crossed paths with something ancient that still lives deep in those forgotten woods, guarding a place humans were never meant to enter. In another story, a hiker in Alaska named Rachel went missing for 2 days before she was found wandering near the highway, barefoot and in shock. When she finally recovered enough to speak, she told a story that made her rescuers' skin crawl. She had gone hiking near an old logging trail, and as night fell, she realized she had strayed off the path. She tried to retrace her steps but came across a cabin she didn't remember seeing before. Inside, there were candles burning and a single chair in the center of the room. The air was freezing, yet she felt sweat on her neck. Then she heard a voice whisper from the dark corner of the room, "You shouldn't have come here." She ran out, but every direction she turned seemed to lead her back to the same cabin. For 2 days, she wandered in circles until she finally stumbled out onto the road. When rescuers went to find the cabin, they found nothing. Not a single trace of it. Only untouched forest. The 7th story involves a pair of hikers who decided to explore an abandoned mining area. Locals warned them not to go there after dark, but curiosity got the best of them. Inside one of the tunnels, they found old tools and tracks covered in dust. As they walked deeper, they began to hear faint tapping sounds echoing from deeper inside. At first, they thought it was dripping water, but then it turned rhythmic, 3 slow knocks, then silence. When they turned around to leave, the tapping followed them. They ran, light bouncing off the tunnel walls, until they finally reached daylight. When they told their story later, an old miner explained that the 3 knocks were a signal once used underground to warn others of a collapse. The mine had caved in decades ago, burying dozens of workers alive. Some say their spirits still tap on the walls, waiting for someone to answer. The last story might be the most disturbing of all. A park ranger shared his experience while patrolling a remote hiking trail after reports of strange lights. He found a tent set up near a lake, empty but freshly used. He called out, but no one answered. As he walked around, he found another tent about 50 feet away, also empty. Then he saw something that chilled his blood, footprints leading from one tent to the other, circling both, as if someone had been walking between them all night. He followed the tracks into the forest, but they stopped suddenly. Just vanished. That's when he noticed the silence. No wind, no insects, no movement. Then, from behind him, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and heavy, crunching through the leaves. He turned, but there was nothing there. The feeling of being followed stayed with him all the way back to his truck. He never went back to that trail again. All these stories have one thing in common: the moment when everything goes silent. When the forest stops breathing, when nature seems to hold its breath, that's when something is watching. It's as if the woods themselves are alive, observing, waiting. People go hiking for peace and adventure, but they sometimes stumble into places where the rules of the world no longer apply. The sounds disappear, the air turns colder, and suddenly, you're not alone anymore. Hiking is meant to bring people closer to nature, but there's a side of nature we rarely talk about, the part that reminds us how small and fragile we really are. Those endless trails, dark caves, and quiet valleys hold stories that no one can fully explain. Some hikers never return, while others come back changed forever. They talk about whispers in the wind, footsteps that don't belong, and shadows that follow even in daylight. Maybe these are just coincidences. Maybe it's the mind playing tricks. Or maybe, when we wander too far into the wilderness, something ancient wakes up to watch us. The silence is never empty, it's a warning. And when the trail goes quiet, that's when you should turn back. Because in those moments, you're not just lost, you've been found.